Hello and welcome to this short video on some tips and tricks on how to choose your topic and your question, your research question for your thesis or dissertation. So what will we be going over? So first of all, we'll talk about how to make your question relevant to you specifically. Then we'll think about this idea of red thread, which is kind of a buzzword in sort of academic skills, so we'll go through that. And then we'll think about finding a research gap. So what is it, and why do you need it, and how can you actually find one for yourself? Finally, we'll be thinking about using precise language in your question, which is really, really crucial for getting the most out of engaging your readers at this very first sort of book cover to your research. It's your first impression, so making it as beautiful as possible, and also thinking about how to get creative right at the end as well. So if you're in the brainstorming phase, thinking about what your research question is going to be like, it might be easy to think, oh, I've got loads of ideas. So actually my thinking about my question is going to be super easy. I'll just, put down all of my beautiful ideas onto a page and then it'll produce itself. But actually, sometimes having too many ideas is almost worse than having not enough, because having too many ideas can really overcrowd a thesis and can really confuse your sort of argument. So that is something to be really wary of at this phase, and trying to hone it down. So thinking about different ways of picking it is what we'll get into. But also, if you are in this sort of like, I don't know which to pick kind of mindset, then one thing, the piece of advice that I would give just right off the bat is to beware reading and note making without focus. So if you don't have your research question and you are just going through all of your primary resources and your secondary resources without a research focus, without really knowing what you want from them, this is something that I would caution you away from doing if at all possible. Because of course you're going to get the most out of your reading once you do have that specific focus so that you can grab exactly what you need. And also there might be certain articles that you need to read really in depth because it is really relevant to what you want to talk about, and there are going to be others that need just a skimming, for example. So trying before you get into the really nitty-gritty literature searching, to think about, if not exactly your research question, then at least the themes, and some of the salient points that are going to come up throughout the research. So if you do have lots of ideas, then how do you narrow down and make your decision? Well, one of the ways is to make sure that your decision is relevant to you. So one of the things that you can think about are, what are your skills? So for example, you might be able to speak multiple languages, and how can you incorporate that? Maybe an element of translation, or maybe an element of comparison between different cultures can be really interesting for an academic article. Also if you have some expertise in another discipline, interdisciplinarity is something that can really create an interesting focus for your research. So thinking about playing to your strengths can really help to narrow down your ideas. Another one is enthusiasm. All of the best articles, in my opinion, are the ones where you can really feel that the writer loves and deeply cares about what they're writing about. And I also think that that makes it easier for the writer themselves to get out of bed in the morning, and also to find that flow. I often think that taking on the stance of ranting can really help you to end up you wake up and you're like, oh, I've written 2,000 words because I've just been so excited about what I'm writing about. So thinking about which one just makes me more happy and more excited to get started. And then finally, another consideration is your career. If you're thinking about going into academia, you might think, okay, well, I would like to do this certain syllabus. So I know that in lots of different universities, they study from, I don't know, 1850 to 1950, for example, and thinking about how do I incorporate that and how do I make sure that my expertise can be translated into something that I want to do in the future. So now we get to this idea of the red thread. So one really useful way of thinking about your research is as a narrative, as a plot with a beginning, a middle, and end, with a really clear objective. So this idea of a red thread as kind of the linearity, the through line that appears throughout the entirety of your research, rather than having lots of different jumbled up subplots and different things that appear at different times that make the narrative confused. What you want is a really clear, simple adventure story that begins in one place and ends in the other to make it super, super clear. So that's the idea of the red thread. So generally, what will be your sort of through line, the thing that will appear all throughout your academic work will be what is your contribution. So it's kind of the purpose, right? What makes your essay useful to your subject as a whole? And your contribution is relevant in every single section of your work. So that's kind of what this box is sort of indicating, is that in the introduction, the first thing that people are going to be interested in is, okay, maybe you're looking at queerness in Victorian literature, but what are you contributing to this conversation, and why is it important? Why is it something that we want to read and want to have as a piece of knowledge? And continuing that all the way through. So with every point that you make, making sure to link it back to this contribution, this purposefulness and this usefulness, creates a sort of linearity, creates this link between each of the long sections that makes it a much more pleasant and clear read for your examiner. And for other academics who might want to read it as well. So, in many ways, your contribution is going to be responding to a research gap. So, the thing that makes your essay useful is the identification of some kind of limitation in the field of study as it is, and the way that you are responding to that and answering it and filling in the research gap. So, a research gap formally is an unanswered question or an unresolved problem in a field of study, and it can come about in a multitude of ways. The first one, really simply, is just the research isn't there. There is something that you expected to find that wasn't there. So obviously, if you are able to do a kind of preliminary search and not find anything, then that is your green light to absolutely go ahead with that research. But then more fine-tuned, you might find something that has insufficient research. So at the end of an academic article, they might say, okay, well, this is what we did, but with greater resources or greater time, then we would have studied different variables. Might be like people of different class or people of different gender, and expanding it out in that way. So the research might be insufficient. Equally, there might be multiple articles that argue different things, and so you can come in as a third voice and position yourself somewhere between these two articles or these two academics, and thinking about how to find some resolution, trying to find the truth in the midst of this conflict. Also, the research itself might be of poor quality, so you might have looked at the research and thought that the methodology was outdated, or there might have been certain biases as well, which is a fabulous way to find out, you know, a way to produce something better as well. So contributing in that way. And then also there might be some real world problems that produce something completely fresh. So something that happened last week or yesterday is obviously going to provide a totally new area of study if your field of study allows you to be as contemporary as that. So that's going to be a super useful way of producing brand new research. So with all of that in mind, it becomes extremely important to be using precise language when it does become time to write your title. So this will generally come from knowing your contribution well, right? Like, the point of the title is to engage your readers. So knowing exactly what makes your essay important, what makes it useful, and what makes it exciting to readers, and being able to translate that into the title is of central importance when it does become time to write the title. So the best way to fine-tune that title is to workshop it with friends and family, and bonus points if they come from different disciplines. And this is because there will always be certain things that are taken for granted from you because you have spent so much time with your research, you just can't tell the wood from the trees. But different people with different mindsets and different perspectives will be able to tell you which parts are really working and which parts really make sense, and which parts need more explanations as well, or could be fine-tuned. So this is also a really great way of doing it because it's also just fun, and being able to discuss your ideas with your friends and family is also a way of generating ideas. Like, the research might change because of these conversations, so always engaging the people in your life in a way that's like super casual to produce ideas just off the bat like that. So in terms of the precise language itself, it's always a good idea to avoid hyperbole. So these are like exaggerating words like the greatest, the worst, things like that. Jargon as well, things that might alienate readers. especially if a shorter, more precise word can replace it as well. Gendered language as well, avoiding things like mankind or congressman, for example, and vague terms as well. Many, for example, if you say many students, etc., etc., would be considered vague, being more precise with that. If you are trying to do a litmus test of your title, things to be looking out for is that it's descriptive, so it's communicating your main topic, your main idea, that it's engaging as well, so don't be afraid to be exciting as well, and concise. So just making sure that it's not super, super long as well is a good idea. And finally, if you are thinking about making a creative title for your essay, but you're a little bit afraid that it might not be received very well, then I'd just like to share this piece, this anecdote from Helen Sword, who wrote Stylish Academic Writing, which is a fabulous book, and I do highly recommend it if you are thinking of improving your academic writing. So she writes that several years ago, I attended a higher education research conference of which a presentation titled Evaluating the E-Learning Guidelines Implementing Project Formative and Process Evaluations was offered at the same time as one called Throwing a Sheep at Marshall McLuhan. Guess which session drew the bigger audience? She goes on to say the subtext of Throwing a Sheep at Marshall McLuhan might read something like, I am the kind of academic who likes to engage and entertain an audience. This session will be playful, not plodding. You can expect me to use lots of concrete examples and visual illustrations. So I think there's a really important kernel of information here is this idea that every title has subtext. So when you do use a creative and a fun title like Throwing a Sheep, which is some kind of Facebook terminology, there is the thing itself, which it communicates that it's about social media, for example, but it also communicates via subtext that the type of essay that it is. So if you are trying to communicate that you are a rigorous, scientific academic, then you might want to use a different type of presentation title or thesis title. But equally, you can sort of communicate your ingenuity, your originality, and your emphasis on engaging the reader as well. So understanding that titles have multiple functions and can, whilst communicating a lot of information, they can also really engage people. So something like Throwing a Sheep at Marshall McLuhan for a thesis title might benefit from something like a colon followed by the more formal and more informative version of it, whilst retaining that really engaging hook right at the start. So yeah, I highly recommend Helen Sword and absolutely endorse these exciting and engaging styles of academic writing. So that's everything from me. If you do have any questions or any feedback, please do get in touch at academicskills@wolfson.cam.ac.uk, or indeed, if you would like to book a one-to-one session with me on the college website, you can do that at this link on screen now. And thank you very much for watching, and I wish you all the best with your dissertation.